possible.
Also reporting today, the Washington Commanders. There's the Heisman winner, Jayden Daniels. Bart, can he win Offensive Rookie of the Year?
I think he can. I mean, you talk about the dual threat. You know, the big concern with him is how slight his build is. When you think about Louis Riddick and what he talked about, you know, what some of the scouts' concerns were, that he takes square physical hits. But you talk about probably the better of the two when you talk about dual threats. I think he's going to use his legs and his athleticism. We just hope that he can stay healthy for an entire year as they kind of balance out that roster in Washington.
Well, with a lot of the things that happened yesterday between Brandon Ayuk's trade demand and everything else, we did not get to dive into something that Booger McFarland said on the show earlier this week. He was talking about how we could be looking at something of a deja vu this year when we look at the top two rookie quarterbacks. This was Booger.
Don't be surprised if midway through the season we're having a conversation very similar to what we had last year, meaning the number 2 pick, Jayden Daniels, looks better than the number 1 pick, Caleb Williams. Just like we had last year with C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young, because there are a lot of people out of Washington telling me that this young man, Jayden Daniels, not only does he look the part, his teammates know he looked the part. And I think Caleb Williams is going to struggle, and I think Jayden Daniels is going to come out the gate flying.
Oh. So that is a fascinating. I'm trying to gauge the expressions on people's faces. I'm looking over at you, Harold Douglas.
Harold.
What do you think?
I think the situations are kind of different. When I looked at Bryce Young last year, we were more so talking about his surroundings from a coaching standpoint.
Yes.
What Ryan Poles has been able to do with the number 1 overall pick, in which we would never see this ever again, a number 1 pick going to a situation like he is with the Chicago Bears. They have 3 number 1 wide receivers. They have 2 solid tight ends. They have DeAndre Swift. Offensive line has gotten better. Defense has gotten better. That defense made a 360 as soon as they traded for Montez Sweat the back half of the year. They added more pieces to that as well. I think when it comes to the Chicago Bears, the most important person for Caleb Williams is Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator, and not allowing him to go out there game 1 and just throwing the football all over the place 40, 50 times. Having that run game, having that balance and that structure, and Caleb Williams has to do a phenomenal job of playing in structure, something that he did not do at the collegiate level. But I think the situations are a little bit more different because of the surroundings.
Yeah.
Bryce Young didn't have receivers. Bryce Young didn't have an O-line. And that offense was, I would say, atrocious in my opinion for Carolina. So I think Caleb Williams is in a better situation from the players that he's surrounded by.
Well, it's a reminder for those who don't remember. Carolina had to trade a bunch of things away, including one of those receivers you're talking about, to get that first pick. In this case, Chicago sort of got their cake and ate it too. You were there in Washington, however, when the Commanders drafted Jayden Daniels, and there were a lot of people on this show, on the draft the night I hosted it, and other things, who felt he was the better prospect to begin with.
And Washington feels good about the guy they have. He has been, I mean, just being in that building in Dan Quinn's office, talking to Adam Peters, the first-year GM, Jayden at this point has been everything they expected him to be and more, from just the leadership, not just with the guys, but in the building. He is mature. They feel like he's ready for the moment. Yes, we have questions about his build and how he'll stand up, but here's the thing with Jayden versus Caleb. I hope last year kind of lets us take a breath as far as trying to project what these guys can be, because it's not just the talent. We know these guys are talented. It really is everything around them. And for Caleb, his pro day, talking to scouts and execs, like what they wanted to see from Caleb was, hey, we know you can do all the fancy, flashy stuff. Can you do the boring, regular stuff, the like work within structure stuff? We know when the pocket collapses, you can go and create. But that's what he's going to need to show. I would just like to temper expectations a little bit for the Chicago Bears. I think he's a rookie quarterback. Both these guys are rookies. This is a franchise that has not yet shown it can develop a quarterback the right way. A lot of people thought Matt Eberflus wouldn't survive this offseason. He wouldn't be the head coach. So let's give him some time. Next year, it's a talented roster, but we have high expectations, but give the kid a minute.
But it's a win-now roster as well. When you talk about, you know, you're only going to have Keenan Allen for 1 year, and he's going to go on, and you hope Odunze is going to be able to make up the slack. I think this comes down to environments, right? And we talk about rookie quarterbacks, environment matters, right? You talk about, you know, in Chicago, they have the better roster, of course, right? But we talk about winning a battle opposed to winning a war, because arguably this is probably the most talented team that Caleb Williams is going to have, because eventually these guys are going to want to get paid. They're going to start losing some of the talent. This is probably the worst team that Jayden Daniels is going to have. So you ask yourself, who do you trust more? Cliff Kingsbury developing a quarterback or Matt Eberflus who's coaching for his job? Because if this goes sideways early, it's going to be no room for error because they're going to see we're not going to allow him to destroy 2 young quarterbacks. So Caleb Williams is going to have it easy because he can rely on his talent on his team. So he's going to be able to probably have to play more disciplined, handing the ball off, leaning on his veterans, don't try and do too much. They're going to spoon feed him. Jayden Daniels is probably going to be set free early because he's going to have to rely and do everything because he's on probably a team that's less talented, and he's going to have to be able to rely on that athleticism. And that flash and that dual threat is always going to catch our eyes first.
When you started
Okay, I don't care what else she's about to say, but a lot of interesting points that are being brought up here that I actually find that this conversation is actually more interesting than a lot of the other Jayden or Caleb Williams conversations that I've heard in a while. Because I've pointed out a lot now recently that we're really kind of pulling for content to talk about. But this actually is more interesting to me. I totally disagree with what Booger, though, was saying in terms of comparing it to the C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young situation. Bryce Young went to a trash organization, a trash set with a poor ownership, no roster. I mean, it's just like, what did you want Bryce Young to do in that regard? And people didn't realize how good of a situation that C.J. Stroud was going to. Not to mention, there was already those whispers and rumors, so to speak, that C.J. Stroud is not that good of a quarterback, that he has like slow processing. There was already some of those things to come about. And so that kind of set up the situation to be like, whoa, C.J. Stroud, unbelievable. This is not the equal situation. The Commanders have really hit the reset button on their franchise as a whole, new ownership, new coaching, new everything. And there is a tremendous amount of optimism and excitement of what they're building there. And I think there's also more patience there as well with Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury. There's not that pressure of, let's go, you have to be the savior right now. You have to get us on track. You got to win the division. Let's go. There's not, none of that expectations are there. I've talked to a lot of Commanders fans, a ton of them, and they're all just excited to just like become relevant again, to actually have a team that you can actually support and be excited about. They didn't feel good about their own team. They didn't feel good about their own owner. They didn't feel good about it. They didn't feel good about their coaching staff, like anything about what they had. The Commanders, I think, have now turned that page truly. They have coaches that they can be proud of. They have a team that they can be proud of, and they have new ownership that they can definitely be more proud of than the previous owner, right? Even the media is now talking about the Commanders more favorably. But we can't deny. We still have to live in reality, and the reality is that the Chicago Bears they do have a better roster. They are set up to have Caleb Williams be more successful quicker. That you just can't deny. No matter how amazing you think Jayden Daniels is going to be, it's just going to take a minute or two. And believe me, I've said this a lot. I think Jayden Daniels has the potential to be great and could even win Rookie of the Year. But it's not just going to be because Jayden Daniels is so next level elite and Caleb Williams is not. There's going to be other factors at play. Caleb will have to struggle on his own accord, right? And also, they have a really tough division, a harder division than what the Commanders are playing in right now. And so, therefore, Caleb could struggle, and he could not maybe get some of these big win moments. Like, it's possible that he does go 0-2 against the Lions, 0-2 against the Packers. That's not going to be good for him. The Commanders, on the other hand, absolutely, with Jayden Daniels, can beat the Eagles, can beat the Cowboys, can definitely beat the Giants. That sets up Jayden Daniels to now look really great and to play great and to play in meaningful games, right? Beating the Eagles on the road would be huge, right? These Rookie of the Year things, or just this idea of who could be better, right? Which it ends up being like both perception and stats, right? It's like Caleb Williams could maybe even put up bigger numbers than Jayden, but if Jayden Daniels plays some big games, beats the Eagles on the road, goes into Dallas and beats the Cowboys, even if he has a few less, passing yards and a few less touchdowns, people will still say Jayden Daniels was better or had the better year. But on the flip side, if let's say Jayden Daniels and the Commanders beat the Eagles, and I almost said the Sixers, beat the Eagles and beat the Cowboys and beat the Giants, but you have Caleb Williams marching in and beating the Lions and the Packers, that also is going to be a massive boost to Caleb. They both have some interesting storylines as well as the potential for stats. It just seems, though, that the stats should be a little bit harder to come by for for Caleb Williams. It depends, though. It depends on how you want to slice it, because you could say the stats could be easier for him to come by because he has a better team, but also he's playing a much more difficult schedule. So it's going to be interesting. Honestly, it's going to be a very interesting year. I don't think you're going to be able to just look at the stats and the bottom line and say, well, Caleb threw for 4,000 yards and Jayden Daniels only threw for 3,200 yards. Like, you're going to have to really actually watch the film and see who is actually the better player, who is stepping up in the moments, who is being carried by their roster, and who is making their roster work for them, right? Like, there's a big difference. So I think if Jayden Daniels ends up being successful and ends up being a great quarterback, it'll be more because of Jayden Daniels when compared to Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is in a situation to be able to take advantage of his roster. There's just, I just don't really think that can be argued, right? He has some great weapons, and he should really be set up and poised to have that early level of success. But, before I say my but, the other point to make about this is, where is the momentum? Who do people want to see succeed more? It seems like Caleb does have that popularity factor well over Jayden Daniels, right? Everybody was obsessed with Caleb Williams. Because of that, that means the media is obsessed with Caleb Williams, right? These are the people that are crowning, who is better, who's the rookie of the year, right? They're the ones that are sculpting this narrative. So Caleb Williams just has to be pretty darn good to be crowned as the next big thing, whereas Jayden Daniels has to be out of this world, right? For him to be the next CJ Stroud, where he can kind of bypass some of that, he would have to ball out, beat the Cowboys, beat the Eagles, beat the Giants, and have a playoff game and beat, I'm trying to think, like knock out like the Packers or someone, like beat a legit team in the playoffs, right? And not a throwaway team, and have a big game as well. And then even play the next round competitively. That's how Jayden gets to like leapfrog Caleb as a better pro, the next big thing. Should have Jayden Daniels been drafted number 1, right? Like, that's how you get into those conversations. So I do think that it's Jayden Daniels has a steeper hill to climb, and whether or not he can do it or not, it's going to be really awesome to see. And I do think Jayden Daniels, though, is in a great situation. I think there's a lot more patience there for him, and it's not like you better win now. Whereas Caleb Williams does have that tremendous pressure. The whole coaching staff will be absolutely fired if they don't play well, right? They're all gone. And that's a tough situation to be in. That's a very tough situation to be in. So there is the true possibility that the Chicago Bears do just collapse like a house of cards. And then that is then for Jayden Daniels, for his taking to be the best pick in the draft. So really interesting storylines that are going to be unfolding with all of this. And it is going to be fun to see kind of them go back and forth. But I will say this, the last point that I will say to all you Washington Commanders fans. Jayden Daniels really is lacking on the media presence and popularity. He just is. I watch all these shows all over the place. The Commanders definitely lack that presence that the Chicago Bears have with Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams and the Bears are talked about on every single show. Get Up, First Take, First Things First, The Herd, Undisputed, I'm probably missing plenty, and ESPN, NFL Live, whatever. Like, it's just everywhere, right? Everywhere. I see so much less Commanders and Jayden Daniels. I'm always looking for it because I want to talk about Jayden and talk about the Commanders, and I find so much less about that. And again, the less media attention, then the less lore that these quarterbacks get, and the less they get built up, even if they play great, have a great season. So I am really curious to see if that narrative can change at all, right? If that story can change going into the season, if the Commanders do, it just feels like even if the Commanders start off 3-0, 4-0 or something, they'll talk about it because they'll be forced to talk about it on like First Things First in The Herd. But I don't know. It's like, it still seems like the Chicago Bears, and I think maybe because their fan base is so massive, and that city is so massive, that the media wants that market. They want those fans. They want those views. They want those clicks. And so I just think that, again, that will put the Commanders and Jayden Daniels in that deficit. But whether or not they can change that will be really interesting to see. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? Do you think Jayden Daniels can be a better pro than Caleb Williams? And do you think the Commanders as a whole could kind of leapfrog the Chicago Bears as a whole? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, Either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of, and think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.